I think being in a space with one other person in the dark and talking for an indeterminate amount of time takes a focus off things that we do and activities that we busy ourselves with a sense of being and being in the moment, which I think also means that we are more close to who we would like to be. And I think that is really powerful.
This is the Artist Diary podcast, brought to you by the City of Whittlesea. You're listening to Ben Landau share his insights on Dark Talk Time.
I'm Ben Landau. I'm an artist living in Melbourne, and I make different types of interactive live artworks. My background as an artist is quite diverse. I started off as a designer when I studied, but I always was doing some sort of form of performance, and I was always really fascinated with interactivity. So while I was studying and even after that, I was often doing performances where the audience would get involved. And since then, that interest has blossomed, and I've found other artists to work with, which at this point has resulted in Dark Talk Time. Dark Talk Time invites participants to join each other on a conversation and have an anonymous chat. So we invite two people to book into a time where they are asked questions and have a chat over the phone for between an hour and a half.
Would you like to start?
No, you go for it.
Okay. Well, I mean, I moved houses a lot when I was a kid, so I had divorced parents, so I was between two houses.
I started working on Dark Talk Time alone when it was an experience for people in a physical space. And then when I transitioned it to something on the phone, I started working with two amazing artists, Jalen Nile Holmes and Sarah Walker, whom I've worked with before. Jalen is a theatre maker who's really interested in participation and kind of interactive loops with the audience. And Sarah is a multidisciplinary artist who's also an amazing photographer and writer. And she, I think her expertise here has really been in live talking and also in her experience doing podcasts and audio walks. We called this project Dark Talk Time because originally it was supposed to be in the dark, blindfolded with another stranger in a room together. And when we merged it onto the phone system, the phone meant that people were separated in some way, but we're also used to the demeanor of being on the phone and talking on the phone with people we know. So there was a connection there, but something was still missing. And so we decided to keep the idea of being in the dark for both people on the phone line. And I think that severs a connection to a sense of space and time and transports us into a strong connection with that person on the other side of the telephone line. I think removing senses means that people focus mostly on the other senses. So they are very attuned to, in this case, listening to what the other person is saying or phrasing what they want to say about themselves in a way which is more eloquent. That's with speaking, but with listening, I guess there's an eloquence of listening in that we read between the lines more, or we listen more to the pauses, which means that we are closer to that person as well.
I mean, had been planning to move to this new place for a little while, and then lockdown happened, and then I kind of had to move out because I had a very big fight with my dad, and so I had to move out earlier than I was planning to.
Oh gosh, that's rough.
Yeah.
The thing I think with the shutdown that I keep being struck by is life was already complicated, it was, and then it got more complicated.
I think Dark Talk Time is really powerful because it invites people to be in a situation with one other person that they don't know, and in that moment they are anonymous. And I think that's a really unusual position to be in, where you can speak your mind, you can say what you think, you could potentially even lie and be someone else, I guess. But that freedom, I think, from the expectations that we have from people that we already know, who already know us, means that we can be maybe more of ourselves, or we can open up in ways that we haven't before, and there's no prior or future expectations.
I mean, decisions. I guess probably the biggest decision that I made in my life was the decision to transition.
Oh wow.
So that's probably the biggest thing. Which was a decision that I made very young, which I never regretted or anything. I knew that it was right for me.
In Dark Talk Time, it's really important that the participants are anonymous because we feel that that means that they have this freedom to open up. And anonymity is a really interesting one in this circumstance because a lot of the conversations that happen actually tend to be about identity and who we are and who we've been and who we want to become. And there's this, strange shift between the other person not knowing who you are and also being very aware of who you are. It's quite bizarre. But I think it has this disarming effect, which means that people can be who they want to be. And I think the questions that we deliver through Dark Talk Time also put that into question. They put it out there and maybe ask things that people haven't had to answer before. And the reason why anonymity is really important when hearing a question that you haven't heard before is that you can speak your mind straight there and then. And there's very little filter as to, what will this person think of me? Or this is someone I've known for 10 years. They'll see that I've changed. Or this isn't consistent with my identity or my character or whatever that might be. So I think that shift from being with someone else and also not having any ties in the past or the future with them, combined with the anonymity, is incredibly relieving and empowering.
I mean, I guess breakups spring to mind.
Yeah, that's the first thing that comes to mind.
Yeah, and that time where you're like sitting there for like maybe months being like, this isn't working, and like feeling those words bubbling up and not wanting them to.
I think when people sign up for Dark Talk Time, they worry a lot that it will be awkward or that they will meet someone that they don't agree with. But that kind of vulnerability towards the situation quickly dissolves within the first few seconds even, when they hear the sound of the other person's voice on the phone line and they both nervously say hello and they both realize that they're both nervous and kind of have a little giggle.
Hello?
Hello. You should, the two of you are together now.
Oh, wonderful. Well met.
And then from there, they really start to build a culture of trust and generosity with each other. And that is about the kind of weirdness of the situation, but also about the questions and the prompts that the hosts give, which firstly is to say that the host will always be there if you need some help, so you can kind of relax into the experience. And secondly, the questions form an arc, which talks about the past and your identity and where you come from, and then also speaks to different vulnerabilities or things you're having difficulties with, and then turns towards the future where we wonder where we're going to be.
The thing that I've been thinking about since then is you actually kind of want to be with someone whose idea of happiness is the same as yours. And my idea of happiness is like living in a forest. Like,
Oh God, right?
like yeah,
oh my
I'm just
God.
like, want to be in a forest with a good dog and a good veggie garden.
Some people are really concerned when they go into Dark Talk Time, but basically we haven't had any problems. And we find that the attitude once people get in there is that they are interested in each other's experiences and identity, and that leads to a really rich conversation without it things like politics kind of coming up and forming a basis for a divide. That said, we've also had some people who are really interested in talking to people outside of their bubble who have a completely different experience or position. But I think that's for some people and not for all. And we haven't yet gone down that road of more political questions, but we may do that in the future with some maybe extra warnings or questions at the start about consideration of the other person's views. So when people hear about Dark Talk Time, they often have a look at the website, which also has some frequently asked questions and some testimonials from people that have taken part. Then they book a session which connects them with one other person, a stranger who has signed up. And at the time that they've booked, they call up a number and they're greeted by a host, which is one of the three artists. I'm one of them. An artist introduces them to the idea of dark talk time and gives them a few kind of guidance things, asks them if they're sitting in the dark, and asks if there's any questions. The host introduces the two people to the idea and then combines the two people into one phone call where they introduce them without saying their names and give them their first question to start off their conversation. And then the host leaves the conversation with the possibility of the participants at any time calling them into the conversation, which might be for help or it might be for a subsequent question. So from then on, the conversation goes from, we say, between 60 and 90 minutes, but the longest conversation we've had has gone for about 3 hours, and they would have kept going a lot longer if it wasn't midnight. So I think that's a really important part where it's an elastic time period where you can stay for as long as you like. With dark talk time, I'm interested in looking at the potential of very little between two people. So dark talk time is really a phone system like you might have for a telecommunications company or a bank, but the rules are slightly different. There's very little narrative or structure or anything between these two people, and I think the rawness of these two people coming together in this moment creates a very special connection with not many barriers between the people. So I'm interested in the potential of little barriers and the stories that people have within them and the power of listening to those stories and responding.
Oh, that's so interesting though. What a personal thing to decide when you feel like you've finished and become that version of yourself that you want to be.
Yeah, it's actually like a very common, like daunting experience for a lot of trans people when they feel that they have finished and they don't know what to do anymore. Like they sort of lose their direction because they spent so many years focusing on getting themselves to that point that they don't have that focus anymore. They're there. Like,
I think in today's society, we are often in our own little bubbles, and that means that there's a lot of confirmation bias where people tell us what we already believe. They confirm what we think is true. And I think getting outside of that is really beneficial to us because it makes us see that there are other sides to stories or kind of assumptions that we've made. And we've seen that come up a lot in conversations where someone will say, this is true, and the other will say, well, actually, that's not true for me. And I think that means that in general, we become more empathetic with people who are different from us. And I think what that means is that we connect with people, we feel more generous with people, we understand each other even more. And that kind of understanding has a really good feeling, to feel like you're part of a group of people that you enjoy their company or that you value. And in doing so, builds a sense of positive mental health of the people that are in your environment, in your community, who you may have made assumptions about that have different ideas to you. But if you can find points of commonality or ways of talking about those things you might disagree on, I think that's incredibly nourishing. When you think about it, putting people in a situation where they talk to a stranger on the phone about themselves is quite bizarre. It's a moment where you don't know what to expect, you don't know what the questions are going to be, and I think that means that we have this anticipation, but also this possibility of what's going to be there. And the structure of the project really assists that by first exposing these things that we're not really sure about, and then by giving the space and time to relax into talking about them. So for instance, the first question is very easy to answer. It asks participants to reflect on something specific in their past. I won't ruin it here. And they talk about it with ease, and it brings up a lot of other questions to be asked about. And it makes us realize as well that we've all got a story to tell. So I think that the structure of the questioning, and also the demeanor of the host, which is quite friendly and relaxed. We often think of it as like a nerdy waiter, is someone who is really happy to be of service and ask these questions which gently probe and assist the speakers to put their life out there. And people have been responding in that way, which is really positive and generous, which shows that this is more or less working, which is really fantastic. I think one of the most powerful things about Dark Talk Time is not so much encouraging people to speak, but encouraging them to listen. And I think that although that might seem like a secondary part of this experience where you tell your story, but actually having someone who listens to you and who is engaged, who they can't nod their head or blink their eyes or make eye contact because they're on the phone, they have to give audible signals that they're listening. So people are humming and laughing and saying, I see, or yeah, exactly, which means that people are active listeners, which means that people who are telling their story, or not even their story, but something that they're going through or some difficulty or some quandary, means that they are being listened to and they feel listened to, which means that it also gives their story value within themselves, which it already had, of course, but maybe they weren't being listened to. So perhaps it's the listening in Dark Talk Time more than the speaking, which has a greater impact on the other.
I couldn't figure out a way to have any sort of hope or optimism in what was coming. And finally I was like, oh, this might be a problem.
It's a really difficult sort of like, I think, to realize, because when you're not feeling your best, you want someone to validate you. And like, you want to feel loved, and everyone deserves that. And like, you're not wrong in feeling it. Like, no one's wrong in feeling that way, but it's such a horrible foundation for relationships so often, like, because you need that validation from someone else.
The host's role is to be there when they're needed and to be absent when they're not. So the host leaves the conversation to itself, which also has a sense of trust and empowerment to those people there, because they have nothing else to rely on. There is no crutch that will assist them along, but really they're there in that moment with that other person. And that spark between those people, that electricity, is also something that drives the conversation and the really intent listening which goes on. I feel like there's something in Dark Talk Time about the remoteness of everyone being separated. The hosts being probably in their bedroom, connecting to other people who may be in their lounge room, their living room, their bedroom, lying somewhere in the dark. And this connection, which happens through reasonably simple and ubiquitous technology, brings them together for this moment, which is not at all remote. It's really strongly connected. And I think technology often separates us or puts us in categories or keeps us in a bubble of ideas that we agree with. And in this circumstance, I think Dark Talk Time takes us comfortably out of that. We've received really positive feedback from participants. We're really excited to get all kinds of text messages, phone calls, voice messages and emails from people who talk about their experience. A lot of people talk about the close connection that they formed with this other person and the feeling of possibility that they have with talking to people in general. And one thing that really surprised me was people describing a kind of residue or something that stayed with them in the days and weeks after they took part in Dark Talk Time. Last night in a session we had 2 people who did it for the second time, which is really exciting. They came back for more, and I think that's a really great indicator of people who had a really nice experience. And the other nice indicator is people who emailed us beforehand saying they were really unsure or anxious or afraid of what they might say or do. And I think that people who sent us a positive message after that show that it's really a very positive and friendly experience for them.
It's just so nice. What a wonderful way to spend an evening. Thank you.
Beautiful.
Yeah,
Glad to
especially
hear
in
it.
lockdown. Yeah.
We've had a number of people who have had really valuable conversations ask if they can talk with their partner again or to have their contact details. And we've really resisted doing this because we want Dark Talk Time to remain some sort of ephemeral happening which pops up and then disappears. And I think the power of that is not so much the individual conversation that you have with someone, even though it might be memorable. It's also about building the skills and the sensitivity to other people. And so for those people that want to get in contact again, we suggest that they ring up again and get in contact with someone else, because they are skills that you can continue to build, and it is empathy which can be continually nourished and improved upon. But the momentary and ephemeral nature of it is part of its power as well. From my experience, I feel that dark talk time gets people out of their current rut. So if you're feeling lonely or separated from society, or even if you're feeling very self-confident and great about yourself, it can kind of bring you a bit back to earth. It can make you realize the difficulties that other people are going through, or the ways that maybe we should think less about ourselves and more about the community. And I think that it is really powerful in this way of changing gears or seeing things with perspective. Not just about other people or greater society, but ourselves and our role in it as well. We've seen that it's a very powerful project and that people are getting a lot out of it, but we're really careful not to overstate the possibilities that it gives people. Because I think that dark talk time is not an antidote to depression or other mental health issues, which need kind of ongoing counseling and connection with other people who have the skills and the resources to assist. So although I think dark talk time is powerful, I think there are limits to its ongoing use. Like anything, that it is not a panacea for these issues. This project has been really important to me for two reasons. One is that it's given me a real sense of achievement and connection with people through isolation, which has been incredibly heartwarming for me. And secondly, I've connected with these two other artists, and working together in a very laissez-faire, very equal, and sometimes chaotic manner means that we come up with these ideas in a very generous and spontaneous way, which is something that I've been really lacking in isolation. So other than it being a project for other people, the experience of making it for myself has been really lovely. I really hope that participants enjoy the time when they're speaking with the anonymous stranger on the other side of the phone. And I think that's the minimum for me, that they enjoy the time while they're doing it. I don't want it to be uncomfortable in any way. But what has really surprised me and I'm really excited about is the residue that people have described after their experience, where they've reflected on this conversation with this stranger for days or weeks afterwards. And I really hope that the questioning model, as well as the listening and responding culture, I guess, within dark talk time, really starts to imbue other parts of their life with this sensitivity to other people's positions, ideas, identity. An example of this is that someone who took part in one of the early sessions just started ringing people that she hadn't talked to in a long time and using some of the questions that we asked as a model to start that conversation. And that was really lovely to see how people could hijack parts of the project and use it for their own means. And that's perfect. It's wonderful. We're really happy for that to happen. I think dark talk time is really powerful right now in this pandemic, especially for the greater community at large, because I think it has a disarming effect. People come into this experience quite anxious about what they might find at the other end of the phone or the experience that they might have. And this quickly dissolves. And I think that is emblematic of a lot of the concerns that we have, especially around our connections and relations with other people, that we feel like there's going to be some sort of impasse or disagreement, but actually we're all just people and we can find a way to work it out. I think that is particularly powerful at this time of isolation, and that moment when you're in the supermarket in an aisle and you need to find distance between people and you can only see people's eyes, not their whole facial expression, because they're wearing masks. I think that being able to hear someone's voice and the tenor of what they say and the moment when it cracks when they're talking about something difficult for them means that we feel closer together at a time when we're really quite separated, both in our homes and in public space. So I think it's really powerful about reminding us how we can be together.
So I think what will stay with me as well is just this, like, sitting here in the dark talking to a stranger and just being so delighted by what you had to say and, like, really excited for you and proud of you and stuff, and, like, I don't know, what a cool human that I got to talk to. It's really great.
You have been listening to the Artist Diary podcast, presented by City of Whittlesea. For more episodes, as well as artist and project information, visit the Whittlesea Arts website.